Welcome back. Now, the City of Ekurhuleni has offered a lifeline to residents who are struggling with paying municipal accounts, which have been overdue for more than 12 months. Residents can now apply for a 70% debt write-off for rates and taxes as the city tries to reduce its debtors' books and alleviate households' debt in the metro. Ekurhuleni Finance MMC Jongizizwe Dlabathi joins us for more. MMC Dlabathi, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Tell us a little bit more about the motivation behind this incentive you have now provided for residents in Ekurhuleni.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity. Just to give a brief context is that our debtors book has increased exponentially from 18 billion to 23 to now 26 billion. And of course, there are various factors that could have led to the increase in our debtors book. We can argue that probably we need to be more efficient in collecting our revenue. But the reality is that many of our households, because of the economic conditions, are constrained, and they have really been struggling to meet their obligation insofar as paying for these services. In that regard, we felt as a city that we must bring on board a relief and a rehabilitation incentive. And we are quite clear that this is a once-off relief whilst we are rehabilitating our household to continue to make payments. So this incentive, it covers a range of issues. Firstly is that for households whose property value is less than 3 million, we are giving them a 70% debt write-off on the portion of the debt that is 12 months and above, and we are locking the remainder of the balance into a payment arrangement that will be for a period of 36 months equivalent to 3 years. And we believe that it is sufficient for those who are owing us to then make a commitment, given that we are meeting them halfway. This also stretches to businesses, in that some of the industrial companies in the city have also indicated that the COVID, for instance, and the economic recovery has really had a negative impact on their ability to honor their monthly obligation. We have therefore resolved to give them 100% write-off on the interest, and the remainder of the debt, just like the household, it must be locked into a payment arrangement for 3 years. We equally provide this incentive for properties that are above 3 million, because this should not be seen as a compensation to those that are not honoring for services. But there are those who are paying for services, but unfortunately, they've since been struggling. So we are equally giving those properties that are 3 million and above a 100% increase. This also stretches to churches, including non-profit organizations, where they equally benefit 70% of the debt write-off. The essence of it, as I said, is to give a relief, but also to rehabilitate those that are struggling to pay in a form of them entering into a payment arrangement. And we strongly believe that this will also secure income, but also propel the culture of payment within the city of Ekurhuleni.
Yeah, and speaking of securing income as well, you know, I hear you mentioning relief and rehabilitation, and it's all great intention for the residents of that city as well. But can you afford this as a city?
This is the amount that is sitting on our debtors book. And by law, we are allowed to make some prescription. And it is in that context that we are saying, let's give something which is much more meeting ourselves and those that are owing us halfway. So we think that we are not going to suffer greatly in terms of the money that we're supposed to recover, because as I said, the possibility is that we were going to write off a greater portion of that debt through our prescription. But what we are trying to say is that, yes, let's give a relief, but let's not lose an opportunity to collect the debt. As I said, it's sitting at about 26 billion from 1823. So it's quite clear that our household, some of the commercial industries have been struggling to pay. And the likelihood is that these are going to be written off. The point I am making is that it should not be as easy like that. There is a possibility that we can collect, provided that we give a relief and we stretch the payment arrangement into 3 years for those who are owing us to at least make a minimum contribution that will cover the total outstanding amount.
So rather just get a little bit that you can get instead of just scrapping it. So I hear you with that,
Certainly.
but also, yeah, you also mentioned that this would be a once-off relief, you know, and mentioning that there are people who are obviously struggling. We are living in tough times as well, but who knows if the tough times will continue? Most likely they just may. So you won't be able to really guarantee if this is a once-off, could you?
No. Of course, the relief that we are giving is such that at the end of June 2026, we should be in a position to assess the impact thereof. And it is at that point where we'll make a determination on whether we are extending or not. The risk that we must manage is to create an impression rather that this is perpetual. It will come to an end. We will assess its impact, and we are hoping that probably by that time, even the economic conditions would have been far better, because we don't want to create a culture where people would say, we don't want to pay, for we know that at some point in time, this debt will be written off. So we are calling upon to our communities to say, this, we are meeting you halfway, but they must be mindful of the fact that they need to make a contribution so that the city can be able to provide basic services. I always say that the money that the communities are paying into the city, in fact, the totality of all, we do reinvest it back by providing water, electricity, collecting waste, and conducting repairs and maintenance in the same areas that they reside in.
Yeah, and you know, as you're mentioning that it could be a little bit risky as well, are there any measures in place that you will be able to put there to ensure that it doesn't become a precedent that moving forward, that when you do take stock next year and do close the deadline, that then people do know that it was for that period only, which is quite a sufficient amount of time. It's almost a year, essentially, that you've given residents. But let's say, you know, come next year, December, that we still find ourselves and you still find yourself in this position as a city. What guarantee do you have that you won't fall into the risk of having to go down this route again?
So over and above this relief, which I said, it secures us at least some commitment to collect revenue whilst we are offsetting the debt. I am on the drive as part of the revenue enhancement, to propel the culture of payment across all our communities. Because, for instance, there's a 20 billion that is sitting in our household. And that is purely because some of those who can afford to pay for services are actually not doing so. And I'm on a drive politically to call upon for everyone to make a contribution into our coffers. For instance, when I was getting a brief this morning on our revenue collection, the target was about 3 billion for August. And as a result of the efforts that we're putting in, we have actually surpassed the target to 3.4 billion. So there are signs that progressively, if we concretize and intensify our message that people must pay for services, especially those who can fully service their account, if they do so, they will help us a great deal. Those who cannot service their full account, they are not spared from making a contribution. So in essence, every household in Ekurhuleni must make a contribution. Secondly, we are also implementing our credit control, meaning that those that are deliberately not paying for services, commercial and household, we are going in to remove and cut electricity for them. For we believe that they can afford to pay, is that they are trapped in the culture or a practice of not paying. So there are a number of efforts that we are putting in place over and above this debt relief that we are providing. We have also recently taken to council our revenue enhancement strategy, which articulates a number of focus areas wherein we are saying probably we cannot squeeze an orange to produce a juice if we know that it can't produce that juice we want. But what are the new initiatives that we must put in place? Outdoor advertising, the release of some of our strategic assets as a way of generating new revenue, including making investment much easier in the city of Ekurhuleni, so that those who want to invest, they do come and invest in the city, so that we can generate revenue through the trade services like water, electricity, sanitation, waste collection, as well as property rates.
And MMC, for residents who would like to get a taste of that orange juice, that's been squeezed out, effectively so. How do they then apply for this relief?
We have already issued a memorandum to all our customer care centers, and really the application is quite simple. It will be open effectively next week. All that they need to do is to approach their customer care centers with their identification document and of course their account numbers. And that process will ensue by them completing the application form and attaching all the necessary documents that are required. And I'm saying this is not a cumbersome program. Or rather process, because a decision is quite clear that upfront we give you 70%. The most important thing is that you must then commit yourself into a payment arrangement for the remainder of the term.
And just to double confirm on this for clarity also, who also applies, who actually can also be have the requirements for it, it's those who have had a municipal bill for over 12 months.
Yeah, so every household where there is a municipal bill, they do qualify, provided that a portion of their debt is 12 months and above. Anything less than that, it must be locked into a payment arrangement, and then they continue to pay. So it will be applicable on 12 months and above. That is the portion we are giving 70% debt write-off.
Thank you so much for all that clarity and giving us all that information. That's Ekurhuleni Finance MMC Jongizizwe Dlabathi.